everyone. Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What's happening, Rush Nation? Good to be back and talk through the Fantasy Football Bible. Week 11 now, 4 weeks to go to the end of the regular season. So lots going on, lots of things to play for. So no time to waste. Let's get straight into it. Tonight's game, the Eagles versus the Commanders. Eagles favored by 4. The over-under set at 48.5. This is, I think, going to be a really interesting game. I probably agree with the lines here. Eagles by 4. They're on a bit of form. I think they match up very well against the Commanders. I think that the Commanders' passing game will struggle a little bit. I think that Terry McLaurin against Quinion Mitchell is a difficult matchup, whereas I think A.J. Brown has got a really plus matchup this week. The Commanders are boosted with the return of Brian Robinson Jr. He's off the injury report. He is good to go. That's really, really positive and good news here with regards to him. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with him, but I'm posting good thoughts here and hoping he gets back to having a really, really good week. And then 48.5, I think will go over. I think both teams are offensively minded. I think both teams will score points. You really only need them to score 24 points each for them to hit that mark, essentially. I think that will happen. I think the D's are good. I think the Washington D is decent, but I do actually think that the over gets hit here. I think this will end up in the 50s, but I do expect the Eagles to win this game. I think offensively, like I said, it's going to be an offensive game. We expect to be a good amount of fantasy points on order here, so there's lots of things to take from a positive perspective away. And so both these quarterbacks very much in play. Jalen Hurts for me is my quarterback 2 of the week. Jaden Daniels is my quarterback 4 of the week. So again, both of these must start plays. I know Jaden Daniels didn't have a great week last week. I do expect him to bounce back this week. As for the running back, Saquon Barkley, he's my running back 4. Brian Robinson Jr. is my running back 16. Both of these are very much in play for this matchup. The only one I'm kind of Austin Ekeler's on the fence. He's at 32. So I think you can play him in certain, especially PPR leagues. I think there's some value to him. I rank these on half point, if you remember rightly, or if it's your first show, welcome. And so, keep that in mind. Definitely wouldn't play him in a standard. Looking at the wide receiver rankings, A.J. Brown, as I said, plus matchup. He is at 8 this week. Terry McLaurin is at 31. He's got a difficult matchup. I've got Devonta Smith, who is questionable to go. If I get a full injury report before then, he might get a slight move up. He's at 32 this week. He definitely draws the worst of the two coverages out of him and A.J. Brown this week. Noah Brown is at 50. I think he'll get some points, but he'll need to really see some upside for him to be fantasy relevant this week. As for the tight ends, Dallas Goedert is at 16. Zach Ertz is at 18. I think Goddard's got upside. The question is how healthy he is. But in this sort of matchup, he could have some significant upside. But at this point, he's just sitting there in my rankings. If he's your only tight end, I feel comfortable starting him. I don't feel comfortable starting Zach Ertz. I'd be looking to try and find someone a bit better. I have the Eagles DST at 11. I have the Commanders DST at 25. That tells you kind of how I think this game is going to go. And then the kickers, Jake Elliott is at 13. He's startable. Zane Gonzalez at 20. I wouldn't start him unless absolutely desperate. No international games. They're all finished for the season. So we move across to the 6 o'clock window, 1 o'clock, 6 o'clock window, depending on where you are in the world, or the early slate, as we should really be calling it. And we're going to start with Bears v Packers. Packers favored by 5.5. Over under 40.5. This is an over under that's difficult to call. Shane Waldron has been fired, so we're going to get a new look offense for the Bears. But for me, I think the 5.5 is kind on the Packers. I guess because that defense is a little bit of a shambles at times, you can definitely pass on them. I think the Packers will win the game. I'm pretty confident that they'll win the game. I do think that you can run on them. I do think that Rome Odunze is a good matchup. I do think the Bears they will score more points than they did last week because they only scored 3. I do think that the Bears will get a couple of touchdowns in this game. I like the over to be crushed here. I think that the Packers will put on a bit of a clinic as well, fresh off a bye. Worries for me in this matchup. Romeo Doubs is a slightly tricky matchup, but he is very, very good in zone coverage. So that's one that it looks worse on paper than it is. But given how he is, he's a player that is flex worthy. The matchup itself is tricky. He's up against Jalen Johnson, who has been one of the best corners in the NFL. Having said that, he is very good at busting that coverage and has a very high win rate. He actually, of wide receivers with over 75 routes run against zone, has got the second highest win rate. So it is impressive what he can do. So whereas for most on the surface, it's not a great matchup. For him, it's not a great matchup, but he has the tools and has proven all season he can bust that. Does he get the targets? His targets per route run is hovering between 18 and 20%. It needs to be higher to lean into that a little bit more. That is the concern with him. But I will say here that there are some opportunities here for Rome Odunze. I fully expect him to continue on as the Bears wide receiver 1. He does have a great matchup against Eric Stokes in this one. So as for the quarterbacks here, it's really just Jordan Love. He's at 10. I can see a higher ceiling than that, but this Chicago D is not one to be underestimated with. So just be a little careful. Caleb Williams at 23 until I see greener fields ahead. I'm going to be very cautious with my ranking of him. DeAndre Swift is at 19. Josh Jacobs is at 20. This will be a difficult one for Josh Jacobs. He is also carrying a questionable tag, so keep an eye on that one. Moving on to the wide receivers in this game, I have Jaden Reed just inside the top 24. He's at 23. Romeo Odunze is at 40. Romeo Doubs is at 34. So as I talked about, flex worthy. Could really bust it open, but it is a tough assignment for him. Romeo Odunze is at 40. Again, it's just more about the passing volume. When it goes up, I expect him to go up. Christian Watson is at 41. DJ Moore at 47, Keenan Allen 48. I wouldn't start either of these two. This might be a negative game script, but until we see something more out of the Chicago offense, I am really skeptical that there's enough volume to support all three. And with the way that DJ Moore relationship is right now, I am more than a bit skeptical. As for Cole Kmet, he has really dropped off a cliff. He's all the way down at tight end 23. But you can start Tucker Kraft. He is my tight end 8 this week. Moving on to the defenses here. Green Bay Packers are at 8. Chicago Bears are at 15. You know, what I will say is that Jordan Love has thrown a lot of interceptions this year. That is in play for being a half-decent streaming option this week. There are better out there on the board. But if you need a one-off piece, it's not the worst. Or if you've been carrying the Bears because of their performance, you can start them. There is upside there. And then lastly, in the kicking game, Brandon McManus is at 14. Startable if you've got him. Cairo Santos is at 27 for me this week. Moving on to the Saints v. Browns. This is a real messy one. Browns are favored by 1. The over-under is at 44.5. I'll start with the over-under because I think that's easier in my mind. Both defenses are shambolic against the pass. If these quarterbacks, and this is a big if these quarterbacks can actually get into a rhythm and put a game up, this will be high scoring. This both teams have capability of scoring 30 points despite the weapons or lack of weapons that New Orleans have, or despite the tendencies that Jameis Winston has to throw the football. If these quarterbacks get into the zone here, there will be a good high scoring game here because both these pass defenses are atrocious. They're two of the worst in the league. Lots of receivers here have great matchups. Jameis Winston will have a point to prove. He was a former New Orleans Saint. He was let go. Was decided that he was not as good as Derek Carr. Darren Rizzi's got a point to prove. He wants this job. He won last week. He will want to keep building a winning culture here to try and get himself the head coaching job full time. Marcus Valdes-Scantling is someone who has a very, very interesting matchup this week. Mason Tipton has a very interesting matchup this week. So does Elijah Moore. So does Jerry Jeudy, because of how bad these defenses are. Alvin Kamara looks a shoo-in. I think there's more points on offer than the bookies are telling you here. So I really like the over here at 44.5. Plus -1. Who would I say is favorite? Who do I have more faith in? Browns have the better roster, but I think Derek Carr is probably the more competent quarterback. And I think cooler heads will prevail. So I probably fancy the Saints in this one, but I think it'll be close, and I think that's good. Close will mean lots of fantasy points, lots of opportunity here, and I'd like it to remain close. As for these quarterbacks this week, Jameis Winston is at 16, Derek Carr is at 22. Derek Carr, that one's itching me a little bit. Don't be too surprised if I do move him up just a little bit in my rankings. Alvin Kamara, my running back 2, really good matchup for him. Nick Chubb is at 22. Less so, it's probably the only strong defensive unit at any point in this game is the run defense, and the linebackers of New Orleans are half decent with Demario Davis in there. The D tackle's not too bad there either. So I do think that there is some run stoppability there. I also think Ford will get in there and he'll carry a bit of the weight as well to keep going as well. As for the wide receivers in this one, so obviously there's a lot of injuries here on the New Orleans side. So Cedric Tillman, I think, will be the lead receiver. He's at 22. I actually have Marcus Valdes-Scantling after his wide receiver 2 performance last week at 27. I think this is a good matchup. I think that the Saints realize that they will go over the top. He will have a role to play in this game. And the Cleveland Browns have struggled to cover anyone this season. So I do like this one quite a lot. Jerry Jeudy's at 29. Elijah Moore at 35. He has a really good matchup. Mason Tipton's at 49. If you need a desperate streamer this week, he's not the worst play, but there is zero floor there. So if you've got to be really in risky, no biscuit territory to go there. David Njoku is my tight end 3. I think this is a good one for him. Taysom Hill is at 10. I think you're going to see some Taysom Hill this weekend. Fancy him to maybe run in a score as well. As for the defenses here, I do have the New Orleans Saints at 12 just because they can turn the football over, and we all know what Jameis Winston is like. The Cleveland Browns I have at 14. I do think they can get a few turnovers of their own, especially in that non-pseudo run game and with some coverage issues, especially given the caliber of the receivers out there. They're not the most reliable for New Orleans. There is opportunities here, especially as quite a lot of these aren't fully up to speed with the playbook. As for the kickers here, I think it's an interesting one for kickers. If I had to pick one, I'd probably go with Blake Grupe, but he is down at 18 for me. Dustin Hopkins is right next to him. He's at 19. Next on the list is the Patriots versus the Rams. Rams favored by 4.5. Over under 43.5. This feels a pretty good line. The Patriots D has been really solid this year in terms of stopping scores from being seriously run up against them, but they are struggling to score points of their own. So 43 feels good. Probably a nudge over feels good, but I think that's about right. Rams 4.5 again. Can't really argue with that. I know the Patriots won last week and won handsomely. But having said that, I still think this is a game that I would fancy the Rams with the talent that they have here. And I would expect them just to run out winners like they have done in their last couple of outings now that everyone is nearly full strength. Matt Stafford is my quarterback 15 this week. But Drake May's at 9. I think you can pass on this defense, and I do think Drake May is starting to show us a few things here. And he doesn't need touchdowns to score points. He has got some really interesting points with his legs that he can do and extend plays. So I am interested to see how he gets on this week. He is my quarterback 9 this week. Kyron Williams, he sits at 5 for me. Ramondre Stevenson is my running back 21. Both of these are start options, but slightly lower on Pollard. On Stevenson, the fact that I do fancy Gibson to get a few touches, but not enough to be fantasy relevant. Puka Nacua, he's my wide receiver 7. Cooper Kupp, he's my wide receiver 10. Demario Douglas is my wide receiver 44. Kayshon Boutte, my wide receiver 45. Both of those in the flex range. One of those is going to hit a decent number, not both of them. I've hedged here in my rankings. I don't actually know which way it's going to go. Keep an eye on DeMarcus Robinson. He is at 62, but he is a bit of a touchdown merchant. If you're chasing wide receiver touchdowns and you're really struggling, he's not the worst option to fire up, despite the fact I do have him at 62. I don't think the passing volume is going to be there quite as much. I think they're going to run Williams a lot more, especially if they get up. The game script will go with them. as we know, with a 4.5 point schedule. If that goes up by significantly more than that, then I would sit there and say that they will be a bit more cautious. That'd be balls to Kupp, balls to Williams, maybe even balls to Allen at tight end. So therefore, it means Demarcus Robinson, with them not needing to chase the game, might be the odd man out. That's why I've got him at 62. Hunter Henry, he's questionable at the moment, but I do have him at 12. I do think he's a touchdown threat. That's why I've got him there. Davis Allen is at 21. Don't expect him to have huge volume, but I do expect him to get a few, especially if they're trying to control the game late on. Those garbage time points will add up. The Rams are at DST 7. Patriots are at 22. And these kickers I'm not overly keen on starting this week. Josh Carty's at 15. He's a sort of start, but he's not one I desperately want to get into and fire up here this week. And the same with Joey Sly. He's at 23. No slight on him, just the fact that they don't score as many points as you would like or expect here. Right, got 4 more games to get through in this window. Steelers-Ravens divisional game. Ravens favored by 3, over under 48. Yeah, that probably works. You probably would expect the over, I suppose. Steelers good defense, but Ross is cooking, and then we all know how good that Ravens offense is. So yeah, 48 works as a line. I think it goes over that. Ravens by 3, yeah, I think probably even a little bit more. Given how well they have been the last few weeks. Scoring points, I would expect them to win this game by more than that. Lamar Jackson, of course, sits as my QB1 this week. He's QB1 on the season. There's nothing there to take me away from it. What I will say is the surprise is Russ Wilson. He has been really good. He is my quarterback 7 this week. He is the only quarterback outside of Anthony Richardson that has an intended air yards in double digits. He's at 10 intended air yards per throw, which is impressive. Russ is starting to cook. Believe it or not, he is starting to deal in that offense. Only Anthony Richardson's ahead of him, and we all know how that is turning out as the season goes. Looking at the running backs here in this one, and for me, Derrick Henry, he sits just outside of 13. Pittsburgh can stop the run. They got some really good interior help there to help contain Henry. And I think this will be a bit of backwards and forwards, and that could nullify the game script a little bit for them. Najee Harris is at 25. He has got a questionable tag. He did miss some time on Sunday. Jaylen Warren is at 31. He will definitely step in if Najee Harris isn't a full go, or if Najee Harris has to sit out. George Pickens is a great target for me on this defense. He is my wide receiver 2 this week. Zay Flowers is my wide receiver 13 this week. So both of these are definitely in play. Rashad Bateman, touchdown option. He is at 43. So one to watch here. I just noticed that when one of my rankings reset here, which is strange. So I just need to fix this a little bit. Okay, that's really interesting because there's a player here that I had in a completely different spot. So I'm not quite sure why it's landed like that. Okay, just going to publish those. Sorry, not the best audio here, but I also don't want to make any mistakes while I'm doing this. Okay. Going back to tight ends. Both tight ends are in play for this one. So I definitely think you can play both tight ends, both of them in my tight end 1 range. I think I've got them. Sorry, I get that wrong. Mark Andrews is a tight end 1. I'm not starting Pat Freiermuth this week. It's definitely not a play I feel comfortable with this week. But Mark Andrews, he sits nicely in my tight end rankings. I'm just updating them now. So at the moment, Mark Andrews is my tight end 7. Pat Freiermuth is my tight end 19. Is upside of him, but I think you're chasing it a little bit this week with him. The matchup perhaps looks better than the opportunity. Baltimore Ravens are my DST 19. Pittsburgh, my DST 20. You can stay away from both of those this week. Given the fact it's at Pittsburgh, I'm not as high on Justin Tucker this week. He is at 7, but I do like Chris Boswell. He's at 6 this week. Both kickers viable for this one. Right. Moving on to next one. And sorry about all the here for everyone there. Dolphins at Raiders. Dolphins v Raiders. Dolphins favored by 7, over under 44. Again, the trouble with this line is just how bad the Raiders are going to be. 44 feels good. Probably sneaking under in here. I think this is one of those games that could be like 28-10. It kind of has that sort of feel to it. Miami D is pretty decent. I don't think that the Dolphins will want to stretch far beyond what they need to do to win the game. I think they'll do a lot of it on the ground too. There really isn't much on the Raiders side that I like. So to be perfectly honest with you, this is going to be a very one-sided review. I think that the Dolphins will dominate all phases of the game. I think they'll dominate on offense. I think they're dominant on defense. I definitely think they'll dominate on special teams too. So with that, I've got Tua Tagovailoa at 18. Gardner Minshew is my quarterback, 27. There really isn't much to talk about from the Raiders here. Talking about my running backs here, I have Devon Achane at 6. Alexander Mattison's at 26. I actually think he's got some upside this week just because it'd be Minshew throwing the ball. He will throw the ball to Madison a little bit more. I have Raheem Mostert at 36. Raheem Mostert, there's actually some room here for some garbage time points. So if you're desperate for a running back start this week, he's in play here. As for the wide receivers, Tyreek Hill is at 17. He carries a questionable tag. Not seeing that high ceiling. I don't think you're going to get it this week either. Jacoby Myers, he's at 18 this week. Jalen Waddle is down at 46. That's really all I'm talking about for the receivers in this game. I think a lot of it's going to be done on the ground. What I will say with this is with the tight end, Jonnu Smith, he'll be in play. He's at 9. Brock Bowers will also be in play. He's at 5. Slightly difficult assignment for him this week. And I think the passing volume might not be all the way there for him to dominate into a top 3 finish. Miami Dolphins, they're my DST5 this week. Jason Sanders is also flitting around there as well. I've just clicked the wrong tab, but I think I had him at 6. If memory serves me, 4. I had him at 4, kicker 4. So you can definitely start him this week. Right, let's get into the remaining games here. We've got 3 left. Lions, Jags. This is a ridiculous line. Lions are favored by 13, and the over-under is 47. I hate double-digit lines. I don't ever take the double-digit line. I don't bet anyway, but I can't sit here and say that the Lions are going to win by 13 points. I think it's just one of those things. We saw it last week. I know that it wasn't quite 13, but the Jags D is bad, but it's not terrible. On its day, it can really turn up. Yeah, I will always take a team with double-digit points. I just don't. I think more often than not they will hit. So I'd take the Jags and the points on this one. Over under 47. Can't argue with that. That's the mad thing on this line is you're basically saying that the Jags are only going to score 14 points and the rest will be carried by the Lions with that line, which I just think is a bit absurd. So I smashed the over and I smashed the Jags here. I think they're very, very easy lines to pick on this week in this particular game. But I do think that the Jags will be dominated, especially with Mac Jones at quarterback. This offense will lose a bit of its dynamism. It will struggle a little bit. But having said that, there's opportunities here. One thing I would say is the Lions have been good at defense. I wouldn't say they've been as good as their normal standard. They've definitely lost with Aiden Hutchinson a little bit of that pass rush. So I do think if Mac Jones, if he can get together and get in a bit of a rhythm, he can get the ball down the field. They could score some points here. Having said that, he is at 25 for me. Jared Goff is at 14. I just don't think they're going to open the taps. I'm probably struggling there, putting him at 14. There is a chance he might move down a little bit further in this one, just because I think that they're so efficient on offense. I just think that I can't think that they'll be too aggressive here. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's at 11 this week. David Montgomery, he's at 17. There is some goal line work for him there as well. The running back game in Jacksonville is a bit of a mess. So Travis Etienne, he is at 39. Tanks Bigsby's at 44. He's also carrying an injury. If he doesn't go, I definitely think that ATM will go up a little bit more in my ranks, but he has been one of my biggest disappointments. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 1 this week. Jameson Williams, wide receiver 28. Brian Thomas is questionable. He's wide receiver 33 this week. There is some room for him. I'm not touching Gabe Davis or Barge Pole. He's at 58 this week and could easily go lower. Evan Ingram, tight end 2. There's definitely room for him here. Sam Laporta, I've got unranked because of this injury. I'm not sure he's going to go yet. So keep an eye on that one. He is questionable, but I have him unranked as it currently stands. And then I do have Detroit as the DST2 this week. I think they've got every opportunity to force some turnovers from Mac Jones and dominate this game. And Jake Bates is my kicker 1 this week. Going to wrap up quickly with these final 2 games. Titans v Vikings. Vikings favored by 6. Not a surprise. Over under 39.5. Probably not a surprise given how bad the Vikings have been the last couple of weeks on offense. But I do expect them to get right soon. You know, I know that the Sam Darnold MVP thing was a bit of a joke and all that. I think he's better than he has been the last couple of weeks, and I think there will be some rebound there. So I do expect a bit of a get right here with Tennessee. It's probably about as good as a matchup as you can get. He is a little bit banged up as well. He is questionable, but I do expect the Vikings and the over to hit here. I like both those lines. In fact, I think 6 is a little soft. I think if they played a bit better last week, they'd probably be up at about 8 or 9. So give me Vikings -6. Give me the over at 39.5, and I'll get into that. Darnold is at quarterback 19 this week. It does look like it's going to be Will Levis. He's down at 26 for me this week. Moving on to the running backs here. Aaron Jones, again, he's a little bit banged up. He's at 15. Tony Pollard is at 24. I just think the game script, they're going to abandon him, similar to what they did last week, and just basically abandon that game script altogether. Justin Jefferson, he is my wide receiver 3. Calvin Ridley, my wide receiver 19. There is upside there, as I talked about on my show. They're the only 2 wide receivers I want in this game. If you're desperate for one, I'd go with Westbrook-Ikhine, but he's down in the 60s. But there is an opportunity for him to be a touchdown boom play here. TJ Hawkinson still kind of coming back from injury, even though he's not on the injury report. He's at 15. Maybe we might see an improvement from him this week, but I'm not banking on it. But he's the only option here to worry about. Minnesota Vikings, they are my DST1. They've been the best defense in the league this season, and they certainly will be continuing that going forward. And then I don't really want the kickers in this game. I've got John Parker Romo. He's all the way down at 16. But not one I'm desperate to start. Nick Folk is all the way down at 22. We move to the last game of the window. It's Jets v Colts. Jets are favored yet again by 4 over under 43.5. Smashing the under here. Anthony Richardson is back with the worst completion rate of the last 20 years, as I put on Blue Sky, 44.4%. So everyone takes a bit of a hit here with that one. The Jets have been pretty bad on offense. I think they'll be fine on offense. I actually think they're going to win by a lot more than 4. I actually predict that the Jets will win this by close to double digits, but the under will still be smashed, which is telling you all the hope that I have on the Indianapolis Colts this week. There's not many I want to start. Aaron Rodgers, he is at 21 this week with no rushing upside. Anthony Richardson sits at 24. I am generous putting him there at 24. Let me tell you that for free. Jonathan Taylor, he's my running back 7. I think this is a good one for him. Breece Hall sits at 14. Braden Allen sits at 34. Don't want to start him unless I am in a desperate spot with injuries and buys. Garrett Wilson is my wide receiver 5. Devontae Adams is my wide receiver 8. I think both of them will get high volume targets to carry them here. Josh Downs is all the way down at 38. Michael Pittman at 52. Alec Pierce at 55. Anthony Richardson's only completed more than 10 passes in one game so far this season out of 5. I'm not necessarily expecting that trend to continue this week in terms of I don't expect him to get more than 10 completions again this week, which is why all those receivers are ranked so low. Tyler Conklin, he is all the way down at 25. Colts don't use tight ends, so you can pretty much ignore that. No tight ends here for this one. The Jets, they do sit at DST4. You can definitely pick them up and start them this week. And then we have the kickers here, which I'm not feeling good about. So you can leave them. It's actually going to be Spencer Schrader who will be the kicker this week for the Jets, it seems. That's going to do it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much. Hope this has been a good and useful show. We'll be back with part 2 tomorrow. Until then, Rush Nation, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.